All right, so Jose and I both proposed the same talk. I think I'm cursed. This is not my day. Jose and I both proposed the same talk, so we decided that we would split it. So I'm going to do the first half, and then Jose is going to do the second half. And yeah, because it would be boring to listen to the same talk. Yeah, give it. Is it still flickering? I don't want to touch anything. Oh, and the text doesn't display. This is just one of those, I'm just having a great day. And the screen is flickering. All right, I'm just going to go with no text on my slides. And the slides going crazy. Today is not my day. The computer gods have decided that I don't get to do anything fun today. There we go. Yeah, just turn it up to never. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. Use Google Web Fonts. Google Web Fonts don't work. It's great times. So in October 18th, 2011, we released 2.0.0. Since then, we've released 2.1, 2.2, with a bunch of patch releases in between, and we've started 2.3. We've also started 3.0, but it's very super alpha. Like, I wouldn't even use it because it doesn't even work. So, like, I won't use it. So I wouldn't try that one, but 2.3 works. Since then, there have been 20 releases in just under 11 months, because it hasn't even been a year since we released the original final of 2.0. And in that 11 months, we've had 21 releases. I was going to do a release yesterday, but then I drank too much beer, so didn't happen. So now there's only been 21. This is the highest release velocity the project has ever had. It's actually a lot higher than most projects have, surprisingly. It's pretty high. We do about one every 2 weeks, almost one every month. We've gotten pretty good at doing releases now. It's gone down from 40 minutes to about 5. The longest part is writing the blog post. Everything else is automated. So in that time, we've pushed in a pile of features. What we've been trying to do, though, is not just add crap in. We've been trying to focus on what problems we've been having building applications, and what problems people have been reporting, being like, man, this is really hard to do. I wish there was an easier way to do this. So that's the types of things we've been focusing on, and we're pretty happy with the results. We've also really been focused on making upgrading as easy as possible. If you tried to upgrade through the 1.x series, it was pain. Going from 1.1 to 1.2, it was a new framework. Going from 1.2 to 1.3, we broke a whole bunch of stuff. And then going from 1.3 to 2, we broke even more stuff. So we decided to change that and follow more like a semantic versioning system. So if you go from 2 to 2.1, nothing should break. If you go from 2.1 to 2.2, the only things you really have to do are upgrade a config file and make sure that like the app controller and the app helper classes are there in the app model. And then you should be good to go. Everything should mostly work. It's all API compatible. So we've been very sure not to break, to delete or modify any existing tests, just add new stuff in. So we think that's made a fairly easy transition. And has anyone upgraded and found it more straightforward? No hands?
It's kind of fun when people approach us in the IRC, oh, I migrated from 2.1 to 2.2 and nothing works, or a feature doesn't work. Oh, did you follow the migration guide? No. That's all you need. Oh, that was it? These 8 lines? Yep.
Yeah. So it's been a lot simpler than it's ever been before. So some of the features that I'm just going to go into the main features that we've added, and some of the problems we've tried to address, the solutions we came up with, and some examples, some very terse examples because they have to fit on slides, of what we've been doing. So view blocks was a solution that solved a problem where you have, say you have a website that has a sidebar and a top bar and some like Chrome HTML. If you have multiple views that have that same sidebar and that same Chrome HTML, some wrapping elements, you have to put that in every single view, and that makes your HTML very repetitive. And if you ever want to go and change it, you have to go and find all those little pieces of Chrome HTML, go back, change them all, find them in, like, if you have a big application, it could be 300, 400, 500 files. So that's a ton of work. That's not good. So what people ended up doing is using tons of elements to get around this. You make an element for the top little frame, you make an element for the bottom little Chrome frame, and you do that all over the place. But then you can't follow your HTML because there's so many elements. You don't actually know what the HTML is going to come out as because it's all kind of sprinkled around in little tiny files. And you have a little element with 2 lines of HTML and another one with 2 lines of HTML. It's impossible. So what we did is stole some features from, we just went through and stole features from other projects. There's already a good solution for this. So we went through Jinja and Twig, and several other templating languages also implement a similar feature. The idea of slots or blocks. So you build a view or a template, and then you just declare this is a hole, and in this hole is going to be a content block. And I'm going to take the content from somewhere else and put it in here. This allows you to create just views that have just the wrapping frames and just the Chrome that's going to go around your markup, around your actual content. And then in your actual view, you can define just the parts that change. This lets you keep your HTML really dry because you have just the Chrome in one file, the content in another file. If you need to go back and update the Chrome, you just update the Chrome file. It updates all the files that reuse that piece. This also allowed us to replace a couple really annoying variables and solve a couple problems that people have had in the past. There was scripts for layout was a magic variable that just got created when you went to render a layout, but there was no styles for layout. There was no scripts at the bottom of the page or scripts in the middle of the page or scripts in the side of the page. And those were common requests that people wanted. So what the view blocks let us do is give you a reusable framework to make little slots. If you want to put scripts at the bottom, scripts at the top, style sheets in the middle because you don't like HTML rules, or if you want to put styles at the top and then put some meta tags, put some more style sheets, put some more JavaScript, you can do all of that. There's an extensible framework that's reusable to do all of that. So you don't have to file bug tickets and be like, Cake sucks. We also modified all of the helpers to allow you to specify when you make a script tag which view block you want to append it into. So even when you're in a view file, you can say this script tag is going to go on the top, this script tag is going to go on the bottom. And then in your layout or your parent views, you can just say, this is where the scripts for the bottom go. Whoop, wrong way. All right, so we're just going to do a really quick example that fits on a slide. So a parent view, you can see here that this is kind of a wrapper that would go inside of a layout. So if you think of this as just the wrapping HTML, obviously it could be a lot more verbose if you have like actual content. I didn't do that because this is a slide. So you can fetch the title, you can fetch some content, you can grab the sidebar, you can check to see if a block exists by just grabbing it. It's basically a dictionary lookup, so the fetch is basically free, approximately free. So you can check to see if there's pagination. So if this child view defines a pagination block, we're going to wrap it in a div and output it. So you can do things like make conditional conditional Chrome files that just contain markup that could be. So if a view doesn't have a help section or doesn't have a legend, that section doesn't need to be output. But if it does, then it should show up always consistently. So the child view for this parent view, so this is the parent view. The child view is here. You can just say extend. You can call extend once per file. The last one, you can call it multiple times, but the last one wins. So when you extend a view, it's going to render this view, and then it's going to go find that parent view and render that view. And if that view has a parent, it's going to go find that one and keep going. So if you make a really deep chain, you can go all the way back up. And you can also use extend inside any elements or layouts. So if you want to have a layout, extend another layout, you can do that. If you have an element that you want to extend another element, you can do that as well. And then to basically define a block, if you want to define a block as a static string, you can use a sign. And I need some more. Gone too far, too fast. Sorry. You can also define blocks as capturing sections. So if you use start, that starts an output buffer. That will be when you call end, the output buffer is captured and finished. All of the output in between the start and the end is captured as a block. As Jose talked about in the workshops, you can also use start and end multiple times to append to a block. So if you want to split it up for some sort of conditional logic reason, or if you have an element that wants to append into a sidebar, you can do that as well, and you can append into blocks and build them programmatically. Also, if you don't define a block and you fetch a block that doesn't exist, nothing happens. It just outputs an empty string. So it's a very safe operation. Any questions so far? No? Keep going. Next up, JSON and XML views. Building in JSON and XML API used to be very painful. You used to have to make a view file and a layout file for every content type you wanted. If you wanted to make XML output for the index page, you had to make a view file and then just call JSON encode in it. And then, or people would end up doing weird things like, if it's JSON, render this common serialization file. So what we decided to do was that this is not going to work because it's too many extra view files and it's a pain. So instead, we created two classes that allow you to easily serialize JSON and XML. You just define a special serialize variable, view variable, and what the view does is it'll notice that that variable's there. It'll go and find all the other variables that match that name and just serialize them into whatever format it is, whether it's JSON or XML. This has also all been designed to work well with the request component, request handler component, so that if you send a content type of application JSON, it'll just automatically switch you into the JSON view. So you don't actually have to do a ton of work to make a JSON API. You can just define one extra view variable and add the request handler component, and it all just works. You can also use normal view files. So if you don't define a serialize property, a view variable, then what the JSON and XML views will do is they'll try and find the matching view file and try and render that. So if you need to massage the data or do any manipulation or formatting before you output to JSON, you also have that option. And it integrates with request handler. So an example, it's really, really quite short. So this is a normal index. So if you paginate the tasks and just define serialize as tasks, what's going to happen is if someone does a request that has accept JSON, it's just going to output JSON. You're not going to have to do any other work. You don't have to do any conditional. There's no media declaration for this content type, do this function, this content type, do this function. It's all kind of decoupled. And in 2.3, you'll be able to define new extension types. So Mark Eaps has added a feature so that you can say you want to do accept content type of application PDF, and you have a plugin that knows how to take view variables and turn them into PDFs. You can do that as well. Or if you want to do Word docs, you can do that as well. Okay, the hash class. There was another problem. The set class is crazy. Has anyone used set extract? Yeah, have you found there's always some sort of weird problem with the XPath that just doesn't quite work like actual XPath? That's because it's a broken, leaky abstraction. You can't map XPath onto arrays. It just doesn't work. XPath was designed to traverse object trees in XML. It wasn't designed to traverse dictionaries. It's a total impedance mismatch. It's also really inconsistent. Have you ever tried to use set remove with XPath? Doesn't work. And you're like, oh, I'll use set insert. I'll just use the set extract syntax. Doesn't work. You're like, oh, who designed this crazy stuff? It was a mistake. Seemed like a good idea at the time. One of those good idea at the time, but a couple years later, you're like, this was a bad idea. The XPath syntax had a number of problems. There were several open unfixable bugs because the bugs were the features. If we fixed the bug, we broke a feature. So that was a really bad place, and that was one of the signs to me that this is done. As much as people love the XPath syntax, it's not going to work. There's too many problems, there's too many corner cases. And the code, if you've ever worked on the code, like Jose and I have, it is mental. It is absolutely crazy inside. It works, but it's pretty special inside. So what we did is I rewrote most of set to be the hash class. It implements over 90% of set's API, and all methods have a consistent signature. So one of the other problems with set is some of the methods had the path first and the data second. Some of them had the data first and the path second.
Sounds like PHP.
Yeah, it was just like PHP. And everyone bemoans PHP for this horrible design problem. So we wanted to fix it and make it better. So every single function takes their parameters in the same orders. We also managed to improve performance greatly. So extract is up to 1.6 times faster, and other methods are even faster still. And they all use the same dot notation where applicable. So some of them don't support attribute matchers, but they all support the same dot notation. And it's the same dot notation that's used in configure, it's used in sessions, it's used in old classic extract. It's all the same now. So I did some little quick benchmarks. You can always fabricate your own benchmarks to prove your own point, but I did mine. So I took the same data and did the same operation, the equivalent operation 1,000 times, and did some timings. So if we do hash extract for the article ID, and then we do set extract for the same path, it works out to be 1.1 times faster. So that's pretty good. And then we do a more complicated one, which is this path, kind of wrapped funny. It also turned out to be 1.1 times faster. And then we do max dimensions. This is one of the slower functions in set. So if you're ever doing count dimensions and you want to find out what's the deepest part of this array tree, it's actually up to 7.6 times faster. So that's a pretty good improvement. And the code is actually a lot easier to read and way more maintainable. The API is also far more consistent inside hash. The second argument is always the path. The first argument is always the data you want to work on. And then the third argument is either not there for operations like get or extract, or if it's remove, it's not there. But if it's insert, it's the values you want to insert. If it's format, it's the grouping keys. So we've tried to make the API far more consistent, so it's easier to document, easier for everyone to remember. You don't have to be like, is it data and then the path, or is it path and the data? The classic PHP problem. We wanted to not do that. Next up is cake time and cake number. These are originally helpers. The original helpers back in like the 0.06 version was a very different role than what they do now. So that's one of the reasons that the time helper has days as SQL or format as SQL. And you're like, I would never need to format a date as SQL in a view. Like, why is this here? It's because it's been there for a really, really long time. So what we decided to do was pull out the core functionality, make those as utility libraries so that you can use them anywhere. So if you need to format as an RSS in a controller or in your model, because that's how you want to store your dates, you can do that very easily now. Yeah. We've also decided to improve the time zone handling. Originally, the time zone handling was done as offsets, but if you've ever worked with time zones, you know that is a huge lie. Time zones are not GMT offsets. If you live in like North America, we changed our daytime where we, at what point in time of the year we change between DST and non-DST, and other places have done it even more frequently. So if you're in pre-2000 and like if you're in the 1990s, the daytime switchover is at a different period of time than it is now. So that gets really hard to handle if you're just using GMT offsets. So instead we decided to use PHP's native date time zone handling, which uses the very fantastic time zone DB, which does everything perfectly. So some examples of how you can do that. You just have to import the classes, just like any other class. You can convert any time to the server time zone, giving it the user's time zone. So if you have a time zone that's in a user time zone, and you want to convert it to your server time, which should be UTC, otherwise you're going to have fun later on. So you can convert from user data and convert it into your server time, stick it in the database, and then when you're in the view or if you're in somewhere else, you can format and give the person the user time zone, and it will convert from the server time zone into the user's time zone so that when you're formatting times, it's always in their time zone, because it's really tedious to have times that are not in your time zone. You can also use the Boolean checks pretty much anywhere. You can provide a timestamp and then see, is this a date time? Is this today? Is it yesterday? Is it last week? Is it within the last 3 days? Is it within the last 7 days? So all those types of checks are now a lot easier to get at because they're made as utilities. Like, you can also format numbers. Say you had to do it for an email. Well, you could get to a helper there. But if you need to format numbers for various purposes, you can do that pretty much anywhere now. Logging. Logging was another big problem. When you logged a message, it would get sent to every logger, even if that logger was not interested. And every logger that you had attached, you had to be like, is this something I'm interested in? If not, I don't want to do it. So we've decided to push that up to the framework, and you can define logging scopes. We stole that idea from Python because it's really good. The idea is that you can define a scope for a logger, so when you attach a logger into the logging framework, you can say this logger is only really interested in payment-related log messages, and you can define a handler for each type of message. So just for example, if something goes wrong with the payment system or the billing system, I want it to email me. And so you can do that. You can just decouple that so you're not in the catch block of an error, and trying to send an email, you can just log a message. Some other part that's configured somewhere else can get that message and then just do the correct logging action, whether it logs it to syslog, logs it to rsyslog, logs it to a file, puts it in MongoDB, wherever you want to put it. You can separate that concern, and if it doesn't go anywhere, it just ends up in the default error log. And if you configure no default, the framework will try and help you out. But you can also, if you configure at least one logger and no loggers match it, it just sends it to dev null, so it just drops the message. So that's a nice way. So if you want to, the other nice feature of having scope-based logging is if you're in production and there's a consistent problem that you're seeing, but you want to turn on logging for just that feature. You don't want to turn logging on to debug for the whole application because the logs could get flooded. But if you just want to turn on debugging logs for, say, the payment system, you can go in, tweak the level on a per logger basis. So you can say, the logger that's attached to the payments and the billing, I want to capture all the debug messages just for that. And then those messages will start coming in. So that's a pretty flexible way to be able to debug your applications a lot easier. And now it's Jose's turn.
Awesome. Is the mic working, Laurie? Okay. So, event manager. For those who were here yesterday on the workshop, I explained the reasons that we built the event manager. I think for a few years we escaped from doing that for a lot of reasons. But finally we came to the conclusion that that is one of the ideas that we really needed to implement. So the idea is simple. It's just a simple publisher-subscriber pattern where basically we already have this pattern everywhere on the system. We have behaviors, we have helpers, we have tasks, we have components, we have the callbacks in the model. So we already have a publisher-subscriber system, sort of. So it really made sense to make that into a generic system. So we took the time to refactor everything inside the core and made it into this reusable library. So you could also generate new events and new listeners and put them together to build better applications. So the idea is just that an object publishes a named event. So names are or should be unique. And with some data, optionally, a subject to a list of unknown listeners. And those listeners will have the chance to act upon this event, to change the params, to change the outcome, or to abort completely the operation. Some of the built-in events that we already had, but we converted into this system, and we named it this way, are model dot before validate, after validate, before save. You already know them. Also for controller, you have initialize, startup, before render, and also for view before render, view before layout, and the new dispatcher callbacks. One thing that you need to know is that event managers are local to the objects. For example, controller has its own event manager, but it's shared at the end with the view. So if you want to, for some reason, attach a listener to any event that happens in the view from the controller, you can get your own manager in the controller, and that will be copied to the view. But it's not the same for models. So models has their own local event manager. So you need to access the object directly to inject any listener. So we'll get into how to inject listeners to objects that are out of your reach. But keep in mind that those objects are local. So they are very well encapsulated and very well contained. So there won't be any massive everything firing events like crazy. So the reasons that I explained yesterday was like, I was looking one day for a PayPal plugin built for CakePHP, but I found some were good, but they all implemented the same logic of triggering order processing, storing the order. Some even have products. So they were really, really coupled to this idea of a web shop. And I only wanted to get a PayPal plugin that only notified somewhat or something in the application that the payment was processed. So what did I do? Mark at that time had built the log system, and it sort of works like events. So you have a lot of objects that listen to everything at the same time. So I kind of made that logger into an event system, and I realized that it was really useful. So I proposed the idea to the core and said, yeah, let's make that into a reusable system. So if you, the correct way of doing this PayPal plugin is, I get a payment from PayPal, and you say, hey, world, something happened. We have money, yahoo! So anything, other class in your system will listen to that. Oh, we have money. We should go nuts. So instead of going nuts inside that same plugin, you have other part of your application going nuts and spending that money in whatever hookers. So the good thing is that any number of listeners can process the rest of your actions, leaving the PayPal plugin only to the task of receiving payments from PayPal. So this is a simple example, similar to what I showed you yesterday in the workshop. We have an after-save callback in the model, and from that after-save callback, we trigger another one, which is PayPal.afterProcess. And we send the second param is a subject, which is the object that is triggering the event, or it could be another object that is actually the most close association to that event that is being triggered. And the third param is an array of data that will be passed to all listeners, and you'll have the opportunity to change that data if it's read back into the original class that is patched the event. So we have a function, an anonymous function with a listener that will just send an email every time you get a PayPal.afterProcess callback. Any questions about this? Okay, so hopefully it's fairly simple to understand. So the subscription patterns. You have a few ways of attaching listeners to your objects or to your event managers. One is direct. You have the instance of the object having a event manager, so you got its event manager and attach a listener or a list of listeners to it. The other one is configuration based. So instead of pushing listeners to the object, then the object automatically builds itself and gets its listeners from a configuration file. The other one is indirect global, where you have a global event manager that actually listens to all events that happens in the application and can act based on the name. So that's why we have unique names for events on CakePHP. And the other one is convention based. So you load the listeners from an object from a convention defined location. And there's a fifth one, which is configuration convention, which is the one used on dispatcher filters, where you have an array of configuration defining all the listeners, but it's also convention based, because the dispatcher knows where to load that list from and how to build those objects. So you have quite a few options for injecting listeners into event managers, and I think one of the best usages of it is the bucket. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the new debug. It used to have this view class that was evalved. It was really funky, but it was clever by the time without the tools that we have now. So what it does now, it attaches itself to the most, the most important callbacks in the system as the first thing that should be executed, and some others as the last thing that should be executed. So it can actually know the exact time that each part of your application took to render and how much memory. This is an example of using the global manager. I took this from a environment file that we have. So we inject debug kit on the fly on local machines. So we check if there is any debug kit on each there. Then we instantiate the event manager. And globally, we listen to controller.initialize and inject debug kit. So we don't have actually to have debug kit in our code, which sometimes people let debug on some production machines, and people would have to click debug. Oh, what is this cake? Oh, nice. This is environment. So what we actually did was extract that, use the event manager system, and inject debug kits only on developed machines. And so one of the examples of using the event manager is the new dispatcher filters. So let's jump directly to examples. You were supposed to talk about dispatcher filters reasons. Yeah. So let me go directly to the reasons. That's actually why my slide was jumping directly to examples. So dispatcher filters are built around the idea that we needed to have a middleware. So we needed to have like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with rec in the Rails world. We really like the idea of having small pieces of code, doing small pieces of functionality that should go either before the request is dispatched or after it's dispatched, or even at both at the same time. So one of the reasons that we built it was we had some sort of functionality that didn't quite were not a fit for components, were not a good fit for controller callbacks. So we really had like this middle layer that was just before we reached the controller logic. So this is an example of an asset compressor. This is a good example. And actually that's code from CakePHP. No, actually this is the thing that I broke on CakePHP on Mark's story asset compressor. He had this plugin using a controller to dispatch JavaScript and CSS compiled and compressed. So I made it into a dispatcher filter. So it listens to a URL, and if the URL matches some configuration, then it will compile all the list of assets, return the response of type JavaScript, set the body contents to the compiled string, stop the propagation of the event. So stop this request. Here's your data. So please respond with this response object, stop the propagation of the event. That means stop the request and serve this data. And this is a response cacher, kind of taken from CakePHP 2, but modified to my own needs. We get to build the key for the cache, whatever we have at hand, like the URL, the query string. So we store the request into cache. It could be memcache, files, APC, whatever. And that's only if the key is there. But if it's not there, then the request continues. And after dispatch, if there was a param in the request telling it to cache, it will build the key and write the cache. So this is a simple option to just cache things in memcache. I think some of you yesterday was asking me for how to do view caching without files and respecting the cache prefixes. So some of the cool ideas to build with filters, this is actually borrowed from Symfony 2. We could build a complete reverse proxy. We could build a pluggable OAuth authorization that's not using components and that will not actually touch controllers. So sometimes it makes a lot more sense to just stop the request if the user doesn't have authorization keys. And of course for performance monitoring. So you attach some callbacks at the end and before, like for example new relic, and this new relic clone that I have in mind will send data to the servers. HTTP caching is one of the things that was made a lot easier in CakePHP 2.2. We basically took advantage of those three type of caching: your browser cache, proxy cache, and reverse proxies, if you have ever used Varnish. Those are the headers involved in caching. You have cache control, expires, etag, and last modified. Usually you only want to mess with cache control and sometimes with etag. I showed yesterday an example of last modified. And this is how you do it now in CakePHP. You have the response object, and you set the shareable attribute to on or off depending on what's your request. For example, if you're serving, I don't know, a bank account detail page, you probably should have control to private instead of public, because if that request gets cached in a shared proxy, you will probably be displaying sensitive data to other users, which is not good. You can also set the max age for controlling for how long a cache will be stored in shared proxies, whether the proxies should ask again PHP if the request change or not, the response, sorry. So you have a lot of options. I encourage you to read the new Cake Response API. You have full control of all the cache headers. So you get an idea of what are the two models in HTTP caching. You have expiration versus validation. The expiration model, basically you tell the client for how long it should get the cache stored in its local machine or the shared proxy. That's usually what, when you have assets like CSS, JS, or whatever, and you know in advance for how long they will be valid. So I just push new features every Saturday, so it makes sense that clients cache my JS 7 days. And there is the validation approach, which is all the requests hit PHP or the web server, and the web server responds back whether the response has been modified or not since the last time. So let's mess with expiration. You basically use the modified, sorry, it's not modified. I have a problem in my slide. It's not modified, it's cache. It's response cache plus 1 year, and it will set expires header to plus 1 year. And you can also set max age and shared max age. Usually you don't want to mess with those. And with the validation model, I showed you an example yesterday, similar to this one. You get a post by its ID. You set the response modified time to the post modified time, and ask the response if, after being compared to the request, if it's modified or not. And if it's not modified, you just return the response right away. Otherwise, you set the variables and let the view render. Of course, that is not what we wanted in CakePHP. That's way too much work, so we made it automatic. So you include request handler, and you just set the modified time of the response, and that will be done for you. If the response was not modified based on the incoming request, the request handler will abort the view rendering process and also respond to the client with a 304 not modified header. So this is basically the same as the previous example, just more awesome and more automatic. So cache groups. Anyone familiar with the new cache groups? Come on. No one from the workshop was here yesterday? So you are. So what are they? It's basically a declarative, static way of tagging all your cache entries with any string. So I don't know if you ever wanted to like say, well, all these cache entries I have here, they all belong only to post, those belong to comments, those belong to user, those belong to both users and comments, and I should have some way of simply say everything that belongs to users and everything that belongs to comments at the same time should disappear from cache atomically. So we implemented that, and entries are tagged with every group that you defined at configuration time. And you can invalidate that cache at any moment in an atomic way. So it's a good way of organizing your cache entries into logical groups. So let's see an example. I have this from page cache configuration starting in Redis. It should be forever. And it will contain stuff, stuff from comment, from post, and from user. Sorry. So in my home CDP file, I have a element. The cache will be using the config from page. I echo the element. And for example, in my post PHP model, I will atomically delete all the elements at once. So I just cache clear group post in the config front end. So anything that belongs to post, including the element post, the element comments, and the element recent users, will be banished from cache immediately. So it's kind of awesome, isn't it? Yay.
How does the atomic work?
Oh, that's a good question. That's true. It's not atomic on file, obviously, on the file engine, but if you're using the file engine, then you suck. The file engine is just for development or for, I don't know what is there. But if you use APC, if you use Memcache, if you use Redis, if you use, what else? Scache and WinCache, we have a lot of cache, then it's atomic. And the way it works is kind of interesting. It just creates a key with a number, and this key with a number is appended to every key that you create within that cache group. So for example, if you have the key recent comment, it's called recent comment my random key. So every time you delete the group, that key is changed. So the next time that your element will try to read the cache key has changed, because every time you change the group, there's no key. So all the old keys were forgotten and will be cleared by Redis or whatever automatically. So they're actually not cleared, and that's what my next slide is for. So clearing all cache entries on the group will delete everything across engines. So if you have multiple engines having the same groups, it will not only delete in Redis, it will also delete in Memcache, which is kind of awesome. You cannot dynamically add new groups to cache configurations, so you need to really plan your cache strategy ahead. So you cannot change your cache groups on the fly. You cannot say, oh, yeah, it's not anymore post, comments, and user, it's also, I don't know, products. You could do it, but it's super hard, and I would not recommend that. And of course, as I was telling my story, actually the cache entries are not deleted, they're just forgotten and will be at some point deleted by the automatic garbage collection. Model validator. You know what? It's kind of huge, this release. We have a lot of things. So model validator is one of the features that people has been asking forever, like how do I create different validation rules for different forms? And there was an easy way to do that, which is switching the arrays, the validate array on the fly, but it's kind of nasty. And we also have this problem internally inside CakePHP where we had to parse the validation array in multiple places. We had to parse it in the model, we had to parse it in form helper, and those two parsers were different and were not exactly the same, so we had some complications. So we decided to abstract that into objects, and it resulted in being faster too, because we only have to parse validation once. So some applications actually require dynamic validations. Directly modifying validate on the model can be tricky, because sometimes people define the full array structure, sometimes they only define a string, sometimes keys are missing, so it's not easy to just say, oh, let me read this key there. You need to check in advance if stuff is there. And yeah, as I told you, several parts of CakePHP implemented the parsing. So what we did with it was, what you can do with it now is that you can dynamically inspect, add, or remove validation rules for a model. You can swap at runtime all validation objects depending on your own logic, and you can create with this new easy API very complex validation systems. Let's see some examples. You can add rules. This is code inside the model. You can add rules for password, for username. It's basically the same arrays that you use in validate property, but you can now change them and change them on the fly. You can modify rules. You can get the validator, get all the rules for a field, set a new rule, or set a bunch of new rules, or you can set properties to those rules on the fly. Like you get the field password, get this rule required, and change the message to something else. You can also delete rules using the remove function, or you can use array access. So if you're an array junkie, you can just get the validator and set everything using arrays, or unset them, or modify them, or whatever you want to do. And I think this is my last slide. It is. So if you have any questions, I will really happy to answer them. Even Mark, I think.
Yeah, we'll answer questions. No questions?
You're a hard crowd. Come on.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.